This is Ad Infinitum. Ad Infinitum is the award-winning podcast solely focused on audio ads, the creatives who make them and/or the latest thinking that informs them, how the space is evolving, and, my favorite part, a roundup of recent audio ads with analysis by yours truly, Stew Redwine, and each episode's guest. This is Season 3, Episode 2 of Ad Infinitum, titled Stay Safe in Sound, Navigating Brand Safety and Suitability in Audio Advertising, exploring the nuances of brand safety and suitability in audio, the challenges faced, and strategies to protect brands in today's ever-changing media landscape. And for this episode, I'm thrilled to welcome podcast host and journalist Suzanne Rico. Suzanne Rico is a journalist and host of the Wondery podcast, The Man Who Calculated Death, an in-depth look into her family's past and how it still resonates in today's world. She is on Ad Infinitum today to explore and discuss how her podcast journey has led her into some incredible topics that are worthy of discussing and tie-ins to the concept and the challenges faced with brand safety and what I like, brand suitability. So Suzanne, welcome to Ad Infinitum. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. And yeah, it's been quite the learning experience for me, as somebody on the other side who's doing a story about her dark family history to bump up against challenges like brand safety and that advertisers are worried about.
I think let's just start right there. Why don't you tell us the elevator pitch for the show, for the listeners, for the chief audio officers listening, because I think it sets up this conversation about brand safety and suitability better than anything else, and a little bit of your journey to making the show as well.
So my podcast is a 9-episode long-form narrative called The Man Who Calculated Death. And it's basically a deep dive investigation into my own family ancestry that bumps up against Nazi Germany and my grandfather, who was the creator of the world's first cruise missile for Adolf Hitler. Those are a lot of buzzwords in there that you hear that people might be like, whoa, I get why people might want to learn a little bit more about that before they jump in bed with The Man Who Calculated Death. But the story started when my mom died in 2013, and she left an unfinished memoir about her childhood growing up in World War II Germany. And her dying wish was that my sisters and I finish that book. And that's what kicked off this odyssey. And I think that the discoveries that we make and the family secrets that we unearth and the sort of processing that we have to do about themes like generational guilt and responsibility to history, those are super important topics that we need to talk about today and that I think inform the future. So when you get past those buzzwords like Nazi and Adolf Hitler, I think that there's a lot of really important and beautiful moments in The Man Who Calculated Death and important things that we need to remember.
I couldn't agree more, because the polarization that we're all living in, and is undeniable, is so based on this right and wrong, good and bad, up and down, left and right. And it's to me, the complex part of being alive, and as I grow older, is two things can be simultaneously true. And they are. I listened to The Man Who Calculated Death all the way up to the paywall, because there's a paywall, which I want to talk to you about that with Wondery Plus, to kind of have that experience of what was free. And it's I think it's a really hard thing for people to understand that a guy can go to work and design V1 rockets for the Nazis. It's like a litmus test for me for, frankly, spiritual maturity. That someone could go, oh, this guy, your grandfather, is at work making V1 rockets for Adolf during the day and can come home and muss his kid's hair and give his wife a hug and be loving at night. Yeah, that's a hard thing to get through your head.
It is. You talk about good and evil and ups and downs, and that would have been so much easier for me if he had just been pure evil or pure good, right? Either of those would have been so much easier for me personally, emotionally, as a journalist, everything. But the fact is that we are all these various shades of gray. And so I had to pull so many threads in from history. I mean, he died in 1969, so I never met him. So I'm trying to get inside the mind of a dead man. And so I had to really braid all these threads together. And he was just a really complex, complicated person. And I think that is a universal, right? I don't care if you're talking about Nazi Germany or if you're talking about right now. We are all complicated individuals who are a We're a sum of all of the choices that we've made in a lifetime.
Yes, and we can make a different decision each day. And like you said, it is a lot easier when it's over-indexed one way or the other. What's unfortunate to see is the industrial enragement complex snapping to that finish line, like trying to get to, they are pure evil, so hate them. Because if I can get you over that line, which I actually think isn't a horrible line, like there are certain things that like there is a certain place, but most of us, most of the time, are all these shades of gray. And it's really about what are you going to do today? And yeah, people have done things in their past. So that's what this is all about. And I imagine that was a challenge when you were putting this together and looking for sponsorships or talking to advertisers. Like, what has that been like?
Well, it's been a surprise for me. I see this story as really such a wonderful, first of all, it's a wonderful narrative, I think, that you can follow and you can get back into 1920s Germany when the first planes were flying and my grandfather was this star pilot. And then you go into the 30s when Hitler was starting to take over Germany and he thought, he hated Hitler. He just thought Hitler was going to blow over. And then you get into the late 30s where he is now not an aeronautical engineer making touring planes anymore. The Nazis grab him to make warplanes. And what should he do? He's got 5 children, like all of these things. So the narrative is really great, but I didn't see it as, I guess, a negative in the way that advertisers might have seen it. And so it surprised me when companies that we were looking to partner with for distribution were like, well, wait, we don't know if we can sell this. We don't know if we want to touch close to this. And I was like, no, you have to listen to it. It's not that story. So for me, that kind of threw me off a little bit. And then I had to realize that unless I made them understand that the story was not about a bad Nazi, it was about a human being trying to make decisions in a really difficult time, and how those decisions trickled down to his family and how those decisions trickled down to humanity. I mean, his V1 missile is the world's first cruise missile and the grandfather of the Tomahawk missile, which the United States uses and which has saved actually millions of lives because it goes in and it gets wars over quickly, right? If you look at the Iraq War in 2003, that's when they used the Tomahawk. Baghdad fell in 3 weeks. There's a lot of good in that missile too, even though you're talking about a weapon of mass destruction. So again, it's those black and whites, and I wanted people to understand that at the very end of this story, it's a story about family, it's a story about ancestry, it's a story about lessons, it's a story about not repeating the past, and I think it's a story ultimately of humanity and light.
Yeah, and we need to listen to this kind of stuff. I heard one recently is like, the only thing we've learned from history is that we don't learn from history.
Thank you.
So in high school, I got the opportunity to go to Hungary and Romania. And while I was there in one of the cities, I'm pretty sure it was Bucharest, Romania, there was a statue park where they had all of the communist statues in one place. Now, they weren't still all over the city. So it's not like they're down the main street in, like, let's say Richmond, Virginia, right? But they didn't just knock them down and destroy them. They put them in one place. So you can drive through and see and remember that this is what we defeated. Do not forget this is what we defeated. And they will do it again if we give them the opportunity. Evil will do this again if it's given the opportunity. And then it's so important to listen to, like, come on, how many of us drive VWs or BMWs? The legacy of the Nazis is the most horrific, and yet there's still stuff that has impacted our life in the modern world. So if we just abandon talking about this or discussing it at all, we're going to miss all that. We're going to have a massive blind spot, is what I think of.
It's a huge disservice, and you didn't make it as far as episode 5 in the podcast, but in episode 5, I interview a guy named Oscar Jacob, who is one of the concentration camp Holocaust survivors who was forced at the age of 14 to build my grandfather's bombs in an underground concentration camp. And when you're talking about brand safety, you should get on board with this podcast because he said himself, thank you, Suzanne, for telling this story, because so many German people and descendants of Germans want to back away from it. They want to whitewash it. They want to be like, oh no, we didn't have anything directly to do with it. And he said, we need more people like you and stories like this to be out there. So talk about a lesson in humanity. This guy is just amazing, and you cannot help but just fall in love with his humanity.
Well, what I did listen to, that sounds amazing, and it matches the tone of what I did hear in your show. I mean, your mother, and I don't want to give away too much, but just your mom as a standout creates, for me as a listener, all the redemption I needed to go for that part of me inside of me is like, hey, I'm listening to something about a Nazi. So what I want to talk about, bring it back to the chief audio officer, is as we've continued to have this conversation, with the shutdown of GARM is based on keywords. So it would go, your show, like, yeah, bombs, Nazi. Like, there's all sorts of fun stuff that a machine is going to go, does not compute, Ford Motor Company cannot advertise. Okay, so that's with GARM getting shut down and just this change that we're seeing, that is changing, which is good. So it's not just like immediately, but still it's like, well, what do we do? Well, the main thing that we focus on at Oxford Road in our partnership with Seeker is on ad hominem attacks. Basically, how civil is the conversation? So your show is incredibly civil. There's no ad hominem attacks because that's the real problem we've identified. If we could boil it down to one thing, the industrial enragement complex is demonizing, dehumanizing, and calling people names. Well, that's nothing in The Man Who Calculated Death. The Man Who Calculated Death is a history show. So when we think about brand safety, it's been this defensive posture of its universal standards to avoid harmful content. I'm going to avoid harm. I don't want to be in something offensive. Where brand suitability, which is more the zeitgeist right now, and the tools like Seeker are getting better at helping us with this, is it's what are my standards that I identify with, that my brand's identity matches this show's identity and this audience's identity. And then if you have a tool like Seeker to avoid what really makes something offensive, in Oxford Road's opinion, which is dehumanizing and ad hominem attacks, then you're able to match up where, the Man Who Calculated Death all of a sudden goes from being on the bad list because all anybody heard was Nazi to it's on the good list because what it's about and humanity and history and family, those are all standards that our brand identity matches. And the audience that listens to this show, those are people that we want to talk to as well.
So if you look at like the reviews that The Man Who Calculated Death has gotten so far, I am so happy about those, Stu, because they speak for me. These are people that I don't know that are coming in and talking about all what you just said: humanity, family, love, choices that we make, generational guilt, responsibility, all these things that are important concepts. And they are the ones that are saying, like, this is what this is about. So I've been banned off TikTok for talking about my podcast, 8 times.
Yeah, and now we're banning TikTok.
Right, now we're banning TikTok, but TikTok has banned me. What's so frustrating to me, and I'm going to get around to your question because I have something to say about that, but what was so frustrating with me with TikTok is that, like, I was talking with my executive producer, John Cryer, the actor, and he was doing this interview with me about the podcast, and we were talking about all these amazing themes and how we started this story and how the podcast came together and all this cool stuff, and it basically got banned because we said the word Nazi. And so everyone was telling me, you can't say Nazi, you have to say Yahtzee. And I'm like, okay, now I've just looked like an idiot when I talk about World War II and I say, Adolf Hitler, the Yahtzee. It's just so ridiculous. But what was really frustrating was that when I went and appealed those bans, it never gets to a real person. At least on TikTok, I don't think it does. And so these bans were coming. And with regards to like brand suitability, there is nobody, in my opinion, at any company that is going to listen to The Man Who Calculated Death and come out of it saying, this is either hate speech or if it's offensive or anything, that's not going to happen. So at some point there has to be, like you're working on, some sort of compromise or meet in the middle where it's not just this buzzword that you're like, no, I don't want to be associated with Nazis, so we're just going to take that off the table. I hope that is going to happen. And actually, in my own journey of selling this podcast and partnering this podcast, I've come up against quite a few obstacles with people worried. And once we've talked it out and they've been able to speak with me and hear more about it and listen, they've come around. But it's a steeper slope than I would have liked it to have been.
That's exactly it. That is what Seeker's built on. That's our approach here at Oxford Road. Not just looking for individual words that are offensive, but what is the tone and the posture of the show? Simply, what is the civility score? And that just changes it, the focus off of, because anything can be discussed, and even really offensive words, if treated with respect and discussed, like we need to still be able to say it. And that's kind of like what we were talking about, where it's like, if we destroy all the statues and get rid of them completely, we now have a blind spot. If we never say those words and never even talk talk about what those words means or what they were, we're going to forget. And then we've got this massive blind spot. So incredible what you've made. And I think as it gets out there, it does even more, you're going to see an even greater response, because it's so cool that you're taking this on at a time when I think people are more open to it and grappling with this, like, man, I'm so sick of being polarized. And how do I deal with this stuff? So what has that been like? So you're with Wondery. Before we get into the ad analysis for the chief audio officers, just for folks that are interested in kind of the creative process and the life cycle of a podcast, what has that been like? Like, what led to the Wondery deal, and then where are you going from there?
Well, this is my first podcast. So I'm a career broadcast journalist. I did TV reporting and anchoring for years. So, those things are a minute 30, 2 minutes you get to tell your story. So this is now 9 episodes of 35 to 45 minutes. That has been such a learning experience for me to tell the story over, the long narrative arc instead of 2 minutes. I had never done a podcast before. I had no idea how to sell one. Luckily, I had good partners and we took it out. And, partnering with Wondery was a dream for me because I liked their brand. I liked what they did. I liked the podcasts that they put out. It was something that when we got an offer from them, I was absolutely thrilled. We made some, I think, mistakes along the way, in that we produced this podcast 100% ourselves. I produced it, basically. And, Wondery, their main brand, does not take podcasts that they don't produce themselves. So there was no way for us to go with the Wondery brand. So we went with the Wondery Plus brand, which is, of course, behind the paywall. So that is the deal that I made. Do I like having it behind a paywall? I'm not very good at going behind paywalls myself. So no, I don't. But the Wondery experience has been amazing for me. They gave us a lot of great support. They reached out to their brand partners like Apple and, other partners, and got us bumps, got us mentions and things like that, which shot the podcast all the way up to number 11 at one point, which was amazing for a podcast.
Number 11 on what chart?
Believe it or not, we got as high as number 11 overall at one point, which is amazing to me. I don't really understand how it all works.
Congratulations, yeah.
And then we hung out in the top 20 of the history charts for quite some time. We were in the top 20, and ever since everything has been released, we've been hanging out in the top 100. I think it was in the 60s today. So people are listening, even though it is behind a paywall, which is fantastic. So the Wondery experience to me, and this is why I think brand is so important, and you know this, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. It is so important to get in bed with a brand that you respect, and Wondery certainly lived up to that expectation for me.
That is awesome, and it's so cool that you went from short form to long form. I mean, it comes through that you've been a professional storyteller your entire life, and it's a great listen. Like, I cannot recommend it enough. I'm curious, what's next for The Man Who Calculated Death? What are you doing next?
So that's interesting. Stu, this is something I'd like to talk to you more about.
I'm here.
Maybe on a private phone call.
Hello.
Or if anybody listening has any ideas for me.
Yes.
So there's a second season to The Man Who Calculated Death. We took it to Wondery. Wondery's owned by Amazon. They have first right of first refusal on the second season. I don't know what's going to happen with that. So, again, their world is not a world that I know, and I don't know what's going to happen. I have a feeling that whatever is going to happen will happen once the podcast goes wide, and we see how it does when it's out there ad supported.
How does that work?
So that's our next step, and it'll go over to Podcast One, and it'll go out on an ad-supported basis. And that, you and I, when we first talked, I was telling you about this, not pushback, but this concern that I was getting about brand safety and brand compatibility and all of that. And part of that was from Podcast One. They were a little bit concerned. They were able to get past it because their managers of the company, the CEOs and the COOs and the CROs and all those people listened to it. And then they realized this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to be partnered with. And so now that deal is going to go through. But I think there's no way to really judge the true impact of The Man Who Calculated Death until it's been out on the ad-supported, free, quote-unquote, market.
And Podcast One's a great place to be. That's where Oxford Road's main podcast, The Media Roundtable, is as well. So we'll keep it in the family.
Yeah. You know what? I'm really happy with Podcast One. I feel like they believe in the product, which is huge. I feel like they want to have something like that on their lineup. You know, they don't do a lot of this kind of stuff, right? They don't do just series, 9-episode series. That's not their bread and butter. But I think that they saw the value in The Man Who Calculated Death, and they're going to put their money where their mouth is.
Absolutely. Great folks over at Podcast One. And, it's interesting that the way the Media Roundtable started was exactly what the name communicates, or hopefully communicates, which is how do we stop the polarization? How do we all come together and move the incentive off of enraging people into civil discourse? And that's the team at Podcast One recognized that as well. So it's cool to see that they recognize the desire out there amongst, that huge group of us that aren't just radicalized on either side, that are like, hey, how can we understand this shared experience we have of being alive together and being at peace and do more of that?
Stu, I do want to say we have to use our voices.
I can talk!
And those of us who feel more centric, who feel more like, I don't hate the radical right or the radical left, I just want to move the conversation into something that everyone can participate with, I think we have to. And I just wrote an op-ed for the Los Angeles Times, and I think it'll run sometime in February. But it's basically about how when people stay silent and when we can't have a civil discourse because we're afraid that somebody's going to jump on us, then that's when things really start to go sideways. And I'm talking specifically in my case about the neo-Nazi sort of uprising that we're seeing, where people are hanging Nazi banners off of U.S. interstates, overpasses, and they're marching through neighborhoods in Columbus, Ohio. And my point is that we can't just stand by and say like, oh, that'll go away. That'll pass. I'm not going to say anything. It's a blip in the news cycle. Like, no, that's what happened in 1933. And Adolf Hitler was named Chancellor of Germany, and we were off to the races for World War II. So I really do feel like things like Media Roundtable and things like The Man Who Calculated Death and things that are more about having a conversation about how we can not repeat the failures of the past and do better in the future are super important.
They are. There's the quote that's often attributed to Edmund Burke: the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men or good people to do nothing.
To stay silent, to do nothing. That's right.
Yeah, stay silent, do nothing. And it's like, yeah, you got to stand up. A friend of mine the other day, it's a silly example, but it makes a point. A guy flipped him off for no reason, like driving, and he followed him up to the next light and then followed him up to the next light. And he kept yelling at him, why did you do that? All he was doing was asking him, why did you do that? Why did you flip me off? Because the guy had really no reason to. What makes the point of this story is that the guy in the car in front hangs his head out the window and goes, I'm sorry.
I love that. That little story resonates so deeply with me because of the power of apology.
I'm so sorry. I failed you.
That's another thing that we've gotten so far away from. And it's one thing that the point is made in episode 5 of my podcast, where I choose to apologize to Oscar Jacob, the 94-year-old Holocaust survivor who was forced to build my grandfather's bombs. And for what it's worth, I say I'm sorry. And it was so meaningful to him, and it was so meaningful to me, and it's what I could offer. So I think that we forget about sometimes when you make a bad choice, like flipping somebody off on the freeway because you're late to work and you're mad and you're grumpy, and your kid's sick at home, whatever, to just say I'm sorry is deeply meaningful.
Yes, and it's okay.
I love that story. I did not think that story was going that direction.
Man, this has been definitely a show about audio storytelling, but also what it means to be alive. This is incredible. Which is the whole point of your show. So let's do this. Let's listen to some ads, see how people are showing up in History Podcasts powered by Magellan AI. These rankings are based on Magellan's proprietary model, which tracks data from the most downloaded podcasts. And in this case, specifically history-based podcasts is what we're going to be focused on, because The Man Who Calculated Death is a history podcast. And to get a demo, you can go to magellan.ai/ad infinitum. All right, Suzanne, you ready to grade some people's work here?
I'm ready.
All right, the first ad we're going to listen to is from BetterHelp on The Rest is History. We pulled ads from top history podcasts, and some of them have regular top spenders that we see, like BetterHelp and Amazon. And then we've got a couple other examples as well. So first things first, this is from BetterHelp, The Rest is History. Here we go.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. The holiday season brings back lots of traditions, some better than others. What could be more wonderful than to meet up with your family around a Christmas tree, and sing a carol or two.
And that is lovely, Tom. And part of what makes this time of year so magical is all the joy and comfort that we seem to feel. But that, of course, is an experience that we deserve to feel all year long. And a great way to bring yourself some happiness whenever you need it is therapy.
Absolutely right, Dominic. Therapy can help you learn positive coping skills for when you're stressed and teach you how to set boundaries and enforce them. It can help you work through anything, not just major traumas.
So give therapy a try and check out BetterHelp. It's a gift that keeps on giving, helping you easily get matched with a licensed therapist. And best of all, everything is entirely online. Just fill out a short questionnaire to get started.
Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/restishistory today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/restishistory.
All right, there we have it. Sounds like it was the first ad in a break read by the host. What do you rate that on the Suzanne Rico scale of 1 to 10 of persuasion?
Well, first, I love the rest is history. And I want to be honest here. I thought that this ad was going to a funny place, which is we all want to sit around having Christmas carols and singing with our family, but really it can be a real pain in the ass or something like that.
Me too. That's where my head went too.
And that's where I wanted it to go because I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so universal for all of us that we think this is going to be this amazing thing every year. And every year it is amazing, but it also has those moments where you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to kill my sister, or this is not what I wanted, a pair of socks, or whatever, all the funny things that are Christmas. So I didn't love that. I think BetterHelp is fantastic. And I think the concept is so great that we can actually reach out and get somebody when we're feeling like we need it, because we do know that therapy is so hard to find the right person. But I think that ad missed the mark. I think I would give it like a 5.
Ooh.
Is that brutal? Okay, 7.
How would I meet you in the middle at 6? Or stick with your 5.
Okay, the only problem I have with it, it was completely fine. But do you want your ad to be fine? You don't.
Oh, I just did an episode yesterday. It was episode 301, so this is episode 302. And that was exactly where we landed on these ads. It was like, they're fine, they're okay.
I feel like if they had gone into a funny place, and especially with those two guys reading it, it could have been funny and really engaging and also connect with me as a listener and as a possible buyer. To say, oh my God, that is so universal. That's exactly how I feel. I love Christmas. I look forward to it. But every year I'm like, oh, I'm kind of glad that's over.
Fine is exactly right. It's fine. And we can do better. But I love what you're saying. I just want to play the next one for you right away and get your take on it. So here we go. So the next ad is from Amazon Pharmacy. And this was on Heroes, Legends, and Histories.
Amazon Pharmacy presents Painful Thoughts.
The guy in front of me in the pharmacy line is halfway through an incredibly detailed 17-minute story about his gout, a story likely more painful than the gout itself.
Next time, save yourself the pain and let Amazon Pharmacy deliver your meds right to your door. Amazon Pharmacy. Healthcare just got less painful.
All right, what say you, Suzanne?
Come on, I liked that much more because it was kind of funny and clever, right? I mean, we've all been there. Again, I'm always the universal person, right? And so if it speaks to me, and I think it speaks to everybody, we've all had that situation where we're standing there and we're like, oh my God, I got to pick up my kid in 15 minutes or whatever you have to do next. And there's somebody in front of you and you want to jump over the counter and just grab your prescription and run. That one spoke to me. I would say that was like an 8.5. I liked it a lot.
We'll give it an 8.5. Okay.
I liked that one a lot just because I could totally see me being there going please stop talking about your gout.
Yes, I've been there too and thought some gnarly, nasty stuff.
Yeah. And by the way, Stu, that tagline, healthcare just got less painful. Can we all understand that we all want healthcare to be less painful?
Yes.
It's so painful. Insurance and everything that we have to do and getting your prescriptions, all of it is painful. So if somebody can make my healthcare a little less painful, I'm in.
It is a big pain, and it's also worthy of noting that like you could remember that even just seconds after, which might sound sort of ridiculous, but having done, over 20 episodes of this now, that's a good little litmus test, because it will happen where we'll listen to an ad and somebody's like, I got nothing. Like it's literally been 16 seconds and they're like, I know they had a tagline, I can't remember it. So it's speaking of that felt pain, and yeah, it's like how many of us have been there. I do have to say like the subtext of like, don't go outside, don't interact in reality with, I'm not crazy about that.
Yeah, I kind of thought about that too. It's basically separating.
It's saying don't interact.
Yeah, stay in your house, don't go out.
Because it's inefficient, this whole drive to be efficient, efficiency. And it's like, for me, being alive is very inefficient, and relationships are incredibly inefficient. And, purpose of life is to be lived. So, hearing a guy's story and being able to sit in that and maybe even talk to him. But then it's like, okay, let me get off my hind horse. I will say this. You and I both, it felt like that BetterHelp one was like a comedy head fake, because it's like, were they just not aware of how funny that could be? Kind of like the same idea of like life insurance companies. I'm like, why don't they make more jokes about death? So it's like, was BetterHelp, did they just not see that? Do they have a blind spot? Okay. This one is like, I'm going to be funny. And you know what? It actually was funny. Could it be sharper? Yes. But I do think the scenario they painted was clear enough that you're like, it's a chuckle. It's not laugh out loud.
No, it's not LOL, but it's a chuckle. And think about I'm the last person to stick up for any insurance company, but think about the insurance company ads. They're all funny. They got like superheroes coming in, or some guy that gets like mowed over and dropped out of a tree.
So get Allstate and be better protected from mayhem.
They're funny. Like, we all don't like insurance and it's not funny, but at least they can make us laugh maybe during the Super Bowl.
Yes, exactly. And I think on this one too, it's like the music, the tone of the music, and even the narrator's voice, it felt kind of like it was giving a little bit of like the Lemony Snicket's thing of like, not that it was like him, but in tone of the sense of like, I could see him standing there talking to me about the scenario that is amusing and interesting. And it felt more like, I get that I'm amusing and interesting, and I even get I'm only a chuckle. I think the misses happen when somebody's like, I'm laugh out loud funny, and they're not.
Right. And you're like, oh no. That's painful.
Boom. Roasted.
Exactly.
Talk about painful.
All right, this next one is Rocket Money on American History Hit.
Hi, this is Freddie Wong from Dungeons and Daddies, and this episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Blast
Houston,
off.
we have a savings.
That's right. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that empowers you to save more, spend less, and take control of your financial life. Basically, you can see all of your checking, savings, credit cards, and investments in one convenient place. You can understand your spending trends, and most importantly, you can categorize those expenses and set up a custom budget by identifying top spending categories. Listen, you want to track bank statements? It's very difficult. Use Rocket Money to help keep track of all your finances. Rocket Money has over 5 million happy members, and it's saved its users over $1 billion across all of the app's premium features. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Get Rocket Money today at rocketmoney.com/all-in-one. That's rocketmoney.com/all-in-one.
Okay, I've just got to say, maybe it's just that there's so much about history that's dark that they're like, we need all our ad breaks to be funny. Because I'm like, are we listening to comedy podcasts? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, but honestly, Stu, like, I feel sorry for Freddie Wong because he had so many words to say and only a certain amount of time to say it. And he was going so fast and I didn't understand anything in there. And I was just like, what am I supposed to be getting from this ad?
Oh, okay.
I mean, that was so much information stuffed in there. If I'm a listener and I'm coming out of this, like, oh, we're going to talk about the highlights and challenges Carter faced while in office. And then all of a sudden it's like, what do I walk away with from that? Do I walk away with like, I don't even remember that it's Rocket Money, I don't think. Sorry.
Wow. No, I love it. You're giving us the real deal. So BetterHelp was a 5. Amazon was an 8.5. What's Rocket Money?
6? I don't know. Maybe a 5. Obviously, I'm a hard grader.
It's a 5 for different reasons. It sounds like you want it to be a 5. Okay.
What I would have liked, like, take out half the words here and just slow it down and let me process it as a listener of what you're offering me. There's so much that they're offering me that I feel like it all gets lost. I'm not really even sure what I'm supposed to take away from this ad. And isn't that sort of like advertising 101?
Yes.
Like, I knew exactly what the Amazon ad was offering me. It was offering to have somebody deliver my medications. You know, and even the first one, BetterHelp, I knew exactly what they were offering me. But this one, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to offer me. I'm sure if I go back and read it and listen to it a few more times, I might understand.
You're doing a great job. Too many words. It's like an Amadeus when he goes, what's wrong with this? Too many notes.
And there are simply too many notes.
Too many words. Listen, Stu, you were saying that you tend to get into monologues. Too many words. I'm a writer. If I just cut half my words, my stuff is so much better. I am pointing the finger at myself, Rocket Money. I do the same thing.
Seriously.
We got to cut out half the words and our stuff is better.
It's so true. I really got into stuff, I guess it was earlier last year, about like behavioral science, and had Richard Schotten on the show, who's written several books on behavioral science and all these studies that they've done. And I remember there was one where it was like a nonprofit fundraising letter, and they like, it wasn't completely arbitrarily because you have to still have sentence structure, but they had like a letter and then they cut, I can't remember if it was 50% or 75% of the word, they just like cut it in half.
And it was better.
And it was, yes. And sometimes I do that, like I'll write something, and I think that's actually a great use of ChatGPT or Claude, is to go, hey, edit this, like only remove words and make it half as long. And, you know, to your point on this one, I mean, it's so great getting your point of view on it, because you're very far outside of who often we have on Ad Infinitum.
I'm a consumer.
Yes.
Yes, I'm a consumer. I'm just a listener of podcasts and a consumer.
Yes. And so it's like, when I hear you, then I go, okay, well, what would I do? They're like, well, hey, this is Freddie Wong from Dungeons and Daddies, and this episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Now, it was funny when the other guy, or whether it was him, blast off, we have savings. I thought that was a great line.
Yes, me too.
And then you can go, I've used Rocket Money for my own finances, and we were able to save in our personal budget $900 on subscriptions. You should check it out. Like that, I just had a very interesting experience having you respond to this, because I am just flagging in myself that I'm in this so much that, like, it's like friends of mine that are really big rap fans, which I've never really been, but they'll listen to it and they'll understand everything the rapper's saying. And it takes me, like, I gotta like read the lyrics. You listen to it and you're like, dude, that was a bunch of gobbledygook. I don't even know. And I was like right with it. I'm like tracking along right with it. I'm like, oh man, I need to check myself because I may be overexposed.
Yes, what you said about, like, it's the funny, the rocket blast, blasting off Houston, we're saving you money, blah, blah, blah. How about take a page from the Amazon book? We can help you make banking less painful. I'm a buyer of that. I want my banking to be less painful. So that's great. But all of that was just like, I wasn't exactly sure what I should do with all of that.
So it gets a 5 for different reasons.
I'm sorry, Rocket Money.
No, it's good for them to hear. It's good for Rocket Money to hear this. I hope their creative team does hear this and take it to heart.
Yikes.
And then, well, what's wild is we all been in the need of performance. And at the right CPM, different things work. And so it's like, you know, this might work fantastic for them. I don't know.
And it would be so interesting to know how those 3 ads...
to get the performance on them, right?
Well, these are not Joe Blow companies, you know. These are big, performative, amazing companies. So they've got to know what they're doing, much more than I do.
We hope so. Yeah, they have money. All right. So this is the last one. This is Ritual from Stuff You Missed in History Class. Here we go.
Big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. This new year, get clean, quality, pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list, including Ritual's best-selling Essential Prenatal Multivitamin, designed with 12 traceable key ingredients to support a healthy pregnancy. With big changes coming up, take the small steps now and start today with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Susan.
Oh, the dreaded disclaimer. I don't have any problem with this one. This one's super straightforward to me. I like the narrator. She's easy on my ears. There's not too many words. I know exactly what she's selling me. It's very specific, right? I'm a almost 60-year-old woman who's never going to have a kid again, so this is not so important to me. However, I appreciate it. It doesn't turn me off in any way. I would give this an 8. It's not like, oh my gosh, hilarious or particularly memorable. Although I do like, with big changes coming up, take the small steps now. I like that little, that's like the tagline.
The construction of that statement.
That's like a little tagline to me.
I agree.
It's a bummer that they have to put the disclaimers in, but you got to deal with that. But yeah, I thought that this was just straightforward, old school advertising.
I agree. I'm hesitating because I'm like, are you saying it's fine? Or is it more than fine?
It hits all the notes that it needs to hit. I mean, you're talking about pregnancy. Women want to just know, like, oh, yeah, I could use this product. I don't think they tried to get too tricky with it, which I think is probably good. Yeah, I mean, it's better than fine.
I think it is too.
But when I say old school advertising, I don't say that in a negative way at all. This is just like very simple. They're not trying to put the frills, the bells and whistles on it. They're just like, here's the product that we have. Here's what it can do for you. This is an important time in your life, and we'll give you 30% off. Done.
Yes. And with that, like, I think thinking of an audience insight perhaps for a woman is like, there's an element of how this feels to me is kind of belly up to the bar, you know, 2 women in a waiting room at the doctor. Like, this woman you just met, but she's just shooting straight with you. Like, hey, holidays were crazy, weren't they? Yeah, they were for us too. Oh, do you live around here? Yeah, I do. Oh, are you in for the da-da-da? Yeah, I am. Oh, well, I got to tell you about this because it's really good. And like, this is a massive health event for a woman, and women are long-term thinkers and risk averse. And so it's like this, to me, you trust this because of its simplicity.
That's such a great word. And I was just going to say the same thing. I don't know from Adam if I should trust this company, but the narrator, the narration, the straightforwardness of it, that sort of like I'm sitting there in the doctor's office talking to somebody who knows something about this. The trust makes me feel really good about this. And I feel like I'm knowing exactly what I'm going to get from this ad. I like it.
Clarity has a cleverness all of its own sometimes.
It does. I mean, we all want to laugh out loud and, you know, that's so clever, but sometimes just that straightforward, like, here's what we're going to give you and this is what it's going to do for you is really quite nice.
All right, so there we have it. So we had a spot from BetterHelp, from Amazon, from Rocket Money, and Ritual. And I am not surprised that for the most part, the Audiolytics scores matched almost identically to how you graded them as well, because persuasion is persuasion. And, you know, the tool that we use here at Oxford Road, Audiolytics, gives us a common language to be able to identify those things that, like, you were able to identify as a listener and give us a better degree of objectivity. So Amazon was the winner at 8.5 on the Suzanne Rico scale of persuasion and a high score of 78% in Audiolytics. So there's a couple of things that it could do better. I think, like we talked about, its approach and its tone in general are good, but if we were going to zoom in and talk about improvements, it's an age-old one for very large advertisers. And I talked about this in the last episode, and I'll say it again, like 1 billion burgers sold, McDonald's. Think about that. That's McDonald's. They're still substantiating with social proof, even though they are absolutely the biggest gorilla in the room. You walk into Walmart here in Santa Clarita, there's a big banner, #1 grocer in California. You're in their castle, and they're saying that to you. So Amazon, even though it is like the one Amazon ruled them all, it's an easy blind spot to have. So that would be what, hey, Amazon's pharmacy is #1 because of, or, you know, it's JD Power and Associates. It's that whole thing of like, what is the social proof? That's one area where it could improve. And also in positioning against the competitors in the status quo would be another thing. It's like, it's definitely positioning itself against the pain and the waiting in line, but are there any other delivery apps or other ways to do this or solutions for this? Just make sure that you're very clearly positioning why Amazon Pharmacy is superior, even in the waiting thing. That, like, here's the thing, you could, something along the lines, I'm just spitballing, of like the trip to the pharmacy, waiting for the guy to finish the story and blah, 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 takes an average of 90 minutes. With Amazon Pharmacy, you'll have your subscription, blah, blah.
We'll cut it to 9.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So some kind of clear positioning and substantiation, which is like some more facts and figures to back up the fun storytelling approach that they're taking.
Yep.
And then next down was Ritual, just eked in under at 76%. You've given that one an 8. I think we just talked about that one. It's taking its customers seriously and respecting them. And then we had the couple that are fine. BetterHelp and Rocket Money. You gave them both 5s, like the meh score, and they had 75%, 71%. Like, structurally, there is stuff they're doing correct. But, you know, you bring up a good point on the Rocket Money one. That was like motor mouth. There's a whole lot going on there. Could we slow that down, put in a personal endorsement? And when it comes to BetterHelp, kind of suffering the same experience you had right after we listened to it. Like right now, like I have to look at my notes to even remember it.
Yeah. I mean, BetterHelp, a great idea, great company, but I don't know. I felt a little bit set up. I wanted the Christmas joke, Stu.
Yes, that's right. It was the head fake Christmas joke. Okay.
And maybe they felt like they can't, when you're talking about therapy, make a joke, but I think that probably people that need therapy really need jokes too.
Well, every stand-up comedian, especially anyone that's worth their salt, is a fantastic consumer of therapy.
That's right. Exactly my point.
Well, this was a ton of fun, Suzanne. Thank you so much for helping us kick off season 3. This is episode 2 of season 3 of Ad Infinitum. And where can listeners go to learn more about you, your work, and what's coming up?
So you can go to my website, SuzanneRico.com. You can find my podcast, The Man Who Calculated Death, on wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Wondery, and it will be coming out wide soon. So that's exciting. I'll be working on the second season. I'm working on a documentary short right now. So I've got lots going on, and you can follow me on all the socials at Suzanne Rico.
Thank you so much. And the big takeaways for the chief audio officers for me are know thy shows, use something like Seek, or partner with an agency like Oxford Road to figure out what is brand suitable for you, because there are people that are putting out things like The Man Who Calculated Death that, from a very simplistic standpoint, just a keyword standpoint, you would overlook and you'd miss an opportunity. And also the second thing that I think, beyond the making the ads work and the day in, day out, is the larger theme of what we were talking about that I think you are doing with your work and that we can all do in different ways, personally and professionally, which is to speak up. And so thank you for sharing your family story. You having the courage to do that helps other people be able to face whatever it is that they have in their family system, and then larger as a culture. But all of it requires us to speak up. And so thank you for doing your part.
Well, I appreciate that. I've heard from a lot of people that have said something similar like that it's really made an impact on them and encouraged them to go and look at their own histories, and figure those out, because the time is ticking for all of us on figuring out where we come from and why it's important. So if that can be the legacy of The Man Who Calculated Death, then that's a good thing.
Hear, hear. Thanks again. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to show us some love with an honest 5-star review. And if there's a specific audio ad or a genre of podcasting or a brand jingle that's stuck in your head that you'd like us to analyze and discuss, drop me a note at stew@oxfordroad.com. And until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of sound, and remember to have fun making the ads work.